Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in about a minute. All right, good morning and welcome to today's Recovery Summit session. This webinar is part of the Recovery Summit series hosted each September by St. Clair County Community Mental Health in recognition of National Recovery Month. As a quick reminder, today's session is being recorded and will be available afterward on the St. Clair County Community Mental Health YouTube channel. For attendees today, we encourage you to use the chat box for any kinds of questions or comments for our presenters today. Our presenters will address them as time allows. And for those requesting continued education credits, please be sure to remain on the webinar for the full session. And please make sure to complete the survey that will be emailed to you shortly after the presentation. So today for our presentation, Voices of Recovery, Lived Experiences from the Journey, we're very, very honored to be joined today by two of our recovery coaches. We actually had three scheduled today, but one of them is under the weather, but we're very happy and very excited to hear from Crystal and Jaleesa today. So they are both peer recovery coaches for St. Clair County Community Mental Health, and they're both going to share part of their recovery journey and their lived experiences. So we're going to get going and start with Crystal. Good morning, Crystal.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal. I am a peer recovery coach here at CMH, and I am a woman in long-term recovery from addiction. That means I haven't had to use a substance to get through life in a real long time. And I say had to because for a while, I truly believe that I couldn't survive without it. But today, not only am I surviving, but I really am thriving. And that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. I want to start real quick by thanking anyone who's watching this because your presence shows that recovery is real, it's possible, and it's worth talking about. And while recovery is deeply personal, it's also something that we share, whether you're walking it, supporting it, or fighting for someone that isn't able to fight for themselves yet. So, my addiction began back in 2010. I had just moved to Canada shortly after graduating high school, thinking I was going to start fresh and build a brand new life. And I did, just not the one I had imagined. Instead, I found myself starting an addiction to methamphetamines. I had no support system over there, no family, no close friends. I was isolated, vulnerable, and searching for connection in all the wrong places. I started to hang out with other people who were already struggling themselves and just trying to survive their own pain. And little by little, I got pulled into that world. Don't get me wrong, the process was slow. It all really started with a simple offer to have a little extra fun at a get-together I was at. And me, with this newfound freedom and independence of mine, thought, sure, why not? I'm an adult now, right? So I did. And if I'm being honest, I loved the way it made me feel. At the time, I was young, scared, lonely, and lost. Getting high made me feel powerful. It made me feel unstoppable and in control, but that feeling was incredibly short-lived. At first, it really did feel harmless. I mean, I had my rules that I would follow. I would only get high on the weekends. I was only using to have fun, and I would only use with these great new people I just met. I really thought I had everything under control. But addiction doesn't care about our boundaries, and it doesn't care about our rules. Eventually, the lines started to blur and then disappear altogether. And before I knew it, I was waking up every single day asking myself how I was going to manage to get high that day. And I know that sounds like a big leap, but that really was my experience. One moment I was having the time of my life, and the next I was getting high just to function on like the most basic level. Everything else in between kind of just seemed like a blip in time. Um, I stopped reaching out to my family back in the States. I let myself go. I didn't care about how I looked. I didn't care about anything at all. And what still hurts to say out loud to this day is that I stopped being the kind of mom that my children needed me to be. Um, Things got so bad, we completely lost control of our finances. I became unreliable at work. I would call in, leave early, show up late, not come in at all. Truth was, I really didn't care about anything if I wasn't high at that moment. And I was really lucky to have that job to begin with. I wasn't even a legal resident of Canada yet. And in my opinion, I had way more important things on my mind than paperwork and immigration forms. So um, eventually, after we both lost our jobs, we also lost our apartment. And at first, it was just bouncing from place to place, sleeping on couches, sleeping on floors, sometimes with friends, sometimes with people we barely even knew, just trying to make it through one day at a time. Um, we would eat at the soup kitchen on most days just to survive. And eventually we found ourselves at a local shelter. It was one of those moments where you go, this is real. um, I never thought in a million years that it would happen to me. I mean, I remember doing the DARE program back in elementary school and thinking, there is no way I am ever going to do drugs. Drugs are trash, right? Uh, but it did happen to me. I did do drugs, a lot of them. And unfortunately, none of those things were even my rock bottom. Um, One of the hardest moments in my active addiction was the day that I got too high to safely pick up my daughter from school. I realized in a panic that I couldn't do it. I was too paranoid to even leave the house. So I scrambled around to find someone else who could. And while that was probably the best decision I could have made in that moment, it still should have never happened to begin with because, I mean, my kids deserve so much better than that. And while I wish this would have been the moment that made me realize I desperately needed help, it's still not quite reached that point. Oddly enough, what did it for me was what I like to call my mirror moment. Um, Shortly after the school incident, like very shortly after, I had caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And I could not recognize the person I was looking at. And I know that sounds cliche. Trust me, I know it does, but it was the truth. I looked so sick. Um, I was pale. My face was sunken in. I looked like I had aged a lot. You could literally see every single bone sticking out of my chest here. I still have such a vivid memory of that moment. That's how much that moment impacted me. And it's not like I hadn't looked at myself in the mirror before. I mean, I did every single day, but for some reason, this moment in particular just hit me differently. I took a good hard look at myself and I hated what I saw. So at this point, life had kind of just become too much, with everything going on and going wrong and piling up, and then having this really dark moment with myself. I just couldn't do it anymore. I knew if I continued like this, I was definitely going to lose my children. I couldn't believe I hadn't at that point. Um, I would probably lose whatever sanity I had left, if that's what you can even call it. And there's a good chance that I could have lost my life. And while I'll never understand why that was the moment that did it for me and not the millions of other horrible things that happened, I'm forever grateful for that moment because it set my life in the right direction. I made a few phone calls, and 2 days later, I got a ride and came back home to the States. Um, I would also like to add, just real quickly, someone can seem completely gone, you know, for a very long time, but you never know when they're going to have their moment, whatever it may be. That makes them realize that they need help, and they become willing to take the steps to try and get better. And I think that's just important for all of us to remember. So, anyways, I got back to the States and I got real honest with my family, which was fun. I told them everything that had been going on. See, my parents weren't allowed to cross the border to come and see me in Canada. And for whatever reason, most of my other family and friends didn't come to visit either. So a lot of what I went through kind of went unnoticed. So I opened up about as much as I could think of, what had been going on, how I lost my job, how we lost our place, where all my money had been going, uh, where all my parents' money had been going, because honestly, they sent me a decent amount while I was over there. Um, I was also in a pretty bad domestic violence situation that lasted for way too many years. Um, and I opened up about that too, because honestly, that was another major reason I wanted to come back to the States and get sober. I wanted to be the type of woman that my daughters could be proud of. And I wanted the opportunity to one day be able to show them what real love is supposed to look like and what we shouldn't tolerate. And I just knew I couldn't do that in the situation I was in. So I told my family everything. And do you want to know what they did? Boy, did they show up for me. They became my support system, helped me find stability, and reminded me that I was still loved, even at my lowest. Not everybody gets that. I know how lucky I am. And that's why I do what I do today, because I want to be that support for other people who don't have it built into their lives the way I did. So, anyway, me and my children moved in with my parents in their tiny, tiny trailer, and I put my focus on getting sober because I had literally moved to an entirely different country. It was pretty easy when I moved back to kind of distance and separate myself from the people I was using with. And that was just incredibly beneficial to my recovery because, nothing changes unless you change something, right? So I was already a few steps ahead in that aspect. I started attending some different recovery meetings, trying to build that recovery capital, as we like to call it, and trying to make connections with other people who could kind of understand what I was going through. Maybe not exactly, but could relate. Um, I spoke with a therapist, a third party other than my direct family and friends, just kind of talking about what I had gone through, what I was going through now. I guess trying to work through some of those emotions and heal from some of that pain. And for the first 6 months, it was honestly all about focusing on myself, my family, and getting sober. After those first 6 months, I felt like I was finally ready to start slowly rebuilding my life piece by piece. And somewhere along the way, I also started volunteering and getting more involved in my community, working with some amazing organizations like Blue Water Recovery and Outreach, for example. And that became a real turning point for me because it provided me with connection, accountability, and gave me a sense of purpose outside of just staying sober. It really did become a path forward. So, with the support of my family and my growing recovery network, my dad actually helped me get my first job in recovery as a janitor at a local mall. And while it may not have been the most glamorous, it did give me purpose and reminded me that I still had a lot to offer. It was my first real steps towards rebuilding a life that I could be proud of. Um, I had one major goal in mind. I wanted to find stability for me and my children and get us into a place of our own. And again, don't get me wrong, the process was slow, but step by step, that started to happen. With the job at the mall, I was able to get into low income housing. Then I found a job as a house cleaner, which allowed us to move into a better house or a better apartment, I should say, that was no longer low income housing. And then I found a way better job at a factory, getting paid way more money, and that allowed us to move into the beautiful home we still have today. Um, See, when our mind and our body are constantly in survival mode, we can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to try and thrive. But I was no longer in survival mode at this point, and as I continued to work on aspects of my life that I was unhappy with, and as I moved from one job to the next, excelling at pretty much anything I tried, my confidence continued to grow, and I decided it was time to take a even bigger chance. So I enrolled in school and obtained my associate's degree, something I'm incredibly proud of, and I plan on continuing. But none of this would have been possible without recovery and ultimately the support systems I had in place. Eventually, with the help and lots of inspiration from some incredible women that I have the privilege of calling some of my closest friends in recovery now, I found the job I have today as a peer recovery coach, helping other people walk through the same darkness I once found myself in. And I truly believe that I'm living my purpose. And as of May 21st of this year, I celebrated 10 years in recovery. And that just sounds really cool to say out loud because in my active addiction, I did whatever it took to get high. I lied, I stole, I manipulated. I chased that feeling because it was the only time I felt even slightly okay. But after a while, even the drugs stopped working. They just kind of numbed me enough to exist. But now, I chase my recovery with that same exact energy. And recovery has given me something that the drugs never could: real joy, peace, purpose, and self worth. I want to say this as clearly as I possibly can. Support systems save lives. You know, my family helped save mine, but I know that isn't the reality for everyone. And that is why I am so passionate about the work that we do here at St. Clair County Community Mental Health and the work that many of you may do out there with your organizations, because we become that support system where there isn't one. We walk alongside people, help them find resources, help them reconnect with themselves and their communities, and most importantly, we provide them hope. Every single day, I see amazing things happen. I mean, I have one of the coolest jobs in the world. Um, I see people get their children back. I see them get jobs and keep them and thrive at them. I see them go through heartbreak and big life changes without feeling a need to use to get through it. I see people start to discover what they love, who they are, and what they're truly capable of, because recovery isn't about becoming someone brand new. It's about remembering who you are underneath all that pain. My sobriety gave me back so much more than just my health. It gave me my entire life back. I'm now the type of woman and mother I always dreamed of being. I'm present, I'm loving, I'm strong. I have a relationship with my daughters now that's built on honesty and trust. I now have a loving relationship with an amazing partner who treats me with kindness and dignity, and he helps support my dreams. I mean, choosing that kind of love for myself feels like a direct reflection of how I feel about myself now. because today I truly love who I am. And in active addiction, unfortunately, I did not. In active addiction, bare minimum, I was just trying to survive. And now I finally get the chance to live. And the woman I was 10, 12 years ago would have never imagined I would be sitting here on this little screen talking to all you guys in the internet universe about being sober. But if I could go back and tell her anything, it would be to stop dragging it out and ask for help sooner, because I was so scared of what I didn't know. And the only thing I really didn't know was just how amazing life can be in recovery. So, to all the recovery professionals in the room, you are the support system for so many that don't have one. And that matters more than you'll ever know. You may not see the results right away, but you plant seeds every single day, I promise. Seeds of hope, healing, and change. And to anyone watching this who might be struggling or quietly wondering if there's a way out, just know change and healing are always possible. No one is beyond hope or help. Me and Jaleesa here are living proof of that. Everyone's recovery journey is different. It really doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there. So, with that, thank you for letting me share my recovery story. Thank you for showing up for others and for yourselves. And most importantly, thank you for continuing to believe in the power of recovery.
Thank you, Crystal. What a powerful story. I've got like goosebumps listening to it. And I know Jaleesa's is going to be phenomenal too. We had some peers the other day present, and it's just so empowering. And folks just love to be able to hear stories of the journey and from folks that have been there. And I think you talked a lot about what peer support services do and how different it is maybe than other roles like therapists or prescribers, that you've really have that live experience. So that's phenomenal to be able to share and journey. And I love things that you said. There's a difference between surviving and thriving, and how being isolated and vulnerable was such like a key factor in things. And another theme that we heard from the other peers that we had talked about is that it seems like in recovery processes that, you know, you draw the line and then you cross it, and then you draw the line and figure, I'm going to be real steadfast here. So you really painted a beautiful picture of that. I wanted to ask you, you had talked about your family as being like such a key support system, and that not everybody has that. So that's the role of helping professionals in such a strong role. For the family members and the friends that are maybe watching that have someone that is in their recovery journey, or maybe at any point in the recovery journey, what kind of advice or suggestions do you have for family, friends, coworkers, anyone who's seeing someone struggle? What are some of the helpful things that your family did? And they don't have to be big things, but what
Yeah.
are a couple of things that your supports did that were really helpful?
I would say a couple things off the top of my head. Number one thing is patience. I know sometimes that's hard, especially when you are concerned about a loved one. But patience really is key here. I mean, I've seen people that it takes them a while before, they really become ready and hit that stage of change where they're really like, it's go time. I don't want to do this anymore. And even me, it took, 5 years. So patience is definitely a key. With my family, they definitely expressed their love for me, and their openness to listen, ask questions, to try and really understand. And the funny thing is, a lot of people in my family didn't even really have a lot of experience with addiction. So it was really, I got very, very lucky, because it's almost like they knew that there's no exact answer on how to, react to something like that or how to behave, but it seemed to be the perfect conditions for me. So definitely, like I said, listening, asking questions. um I didn't feel judged talking to them. You know, they helped me try and, even though none of us really knew what we were doing, they tried to help me kind of navigate the whole, uh, substance use department. I don't know what you would call it, field, trying to figure out like what exactly was going to help me. Like I said, my dad, helped me start fixing a lot of aspects in my life, like helping me get my first job. And I think that was like the major thing that did it for me was, a lot of times when we use, it's not always, but it's to numb us a lot of times from things that we don't want to face or things that we're unhappy with. And I was at a point in my life where I was very unhappy. I was in a very unhealthy, unsafe relationship. I wasn't doing anything with my life. So really starting to work on those aspects of my life is, I really think, a major point of, what I have to credit a lot of my recovery to. So yeah, I mean, things like that, just trying to be understanding, trying to help guide them. I think there's definitely a difference between providing that support and love and then enabling someone for sure. But yeah, I would definitely say patience, love, listening, and helping to guide, helping them find the right services. You know, uh, we didn't know a lot about the services, you know, but if you do, and now I know how to use the internet a lot better, and a lot of people do, so you can
Yeah.
look it up now. So
Yeah. A lot easier than maybe back in 2010, right? To find things.
yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, appreciate that and all the things you said, and you had mentioned too that the awareness that everybody doesn't have that support of that family, maybe right there in that moment, or different things. And you really talked about the power of other professionals, other supports, recovery community, recovery professionals. So if that family support isn't there in that moment, that there are other people out there that are willing, ready, eager, and just want to be able to share that to support to others. So we appreciate that. I want to share there's a lot of comments, a lot of congratulations, and thank you so much for telling your story. It would take a while to read them all, and someone said, thanks for your powerful story, Crystal. It helps renew my faith that some people do recover. And when we plant the seeds, we don't always see the fruits right away, which we don't. So thank you so much for your story. I'm going to transition and talk to Jaleesa now. So Jaleesa is also one of our peer recovery coaches, and Crystal had mentioned her a few minutes ago. So Crystal, you get to take a breath and drink some water and all that. You did a phenomenal job, and we're going to turn the floor over to Jaleesa.
Hi, everybody. I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous, but I'm gonna get through this, right? So I want to thank everybody for being here and watching this. I am living proof that recovery is possible because I was one of those people that everybody thought would never make it. I was so low, and had done so many things that, not only was I hopeless, but a lot of the people around me, unfortunately, were hopeless because I had tried so many times and failed. But by the grace of God and by the supports, which I'm really excited to talk about because my supports are now where I work. Um, I have 5 years clean today. So it's a great day to pick me to speak about this. And I do want to say to everybody out there listening that, never give up on someone. Something that's I'm going to talk about with my recovery story too is mental health. And if you are supporting somebody out there that is really struggling with substance abuse, maybe sometimes you can help them try to navigate that as well. Because for me, integrated into my story is a lot of mental health and how I didn't realize that had an effect on why I was using drugs and not dealing with the traumas of my life. Um, so I'll start my story. Growing up as a teenager and a young adult, I was always like the party girl. I was always the one that like would get wild on the weekends, drink, recreationally use. Um, and now looking back, I understand I did that because I had low self-esteem. Some of you guys know me, some of you don't, but I am 6'2", so I am a tall girl. And in high school, kids were not nice about that. I grew before a lot of the boys, and I was viciously picked on. But I started to realize that when I had this, I don't care attitude, kind of class clown, kind of, stunning and showing off, that people laughed and people liked me. And I started hanging out with a crowd that was older than me, and that was involved with, drinking and drugs. And so I did start at a very young age. Um, I had a lot of traumas, a lot of things happened to me as a child as well. That really, I think, played a key into why I had that addiction just waiting to go in my brain. Um, in 2012, I was involved in a rollover car accident and I broke my back. I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he was under the influence and we crashed the car. I was in the hospital and had to go to rehab, but this was in 2012 before they started doing a lot of the control on what they prescribed to people and how much they prescribed to people. And I was instantly hooked. I was on way too much medication, and you start to build a tolerance to that, which led me to harder things. I had tried to go to rehab a few times, and I remember the first time I went to rehab, and there's women sitting in there and they're telling me about all these things that they did, right? All these things that I'm like, I clutching my pearls, like I would never do that. Like, my boyfriend is a drug dealer. I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to do this. I would never be homeless, right? Because I had a mom who would always let me come home. I had a dad who would always let me come home. I had people around me, that would let me stay at their house, because at this point in my addiction, I hadn't betrayed anybody. So I had a lot of support at this time and didn't even realize it. But I was wrong. I My first attempt at recovery was in 2017. By this time, I had been full blown into everything and realized, I was starting to become a person I didn't want to be. I went to rehab for 90 days and then went to a sober living in Saginaw and did 6 months in the sober living. I was on that pink cloud, as they call it, where you're starting to just get the stuff out of your system, starting to feel good, starting to have a little bit of accountability in your life. I was involved with some really great people. And November 30th, 2017, the boyfriend that I was talking about at that point, we had been together on and off for like 12 years, 13 years. He overdosed and died. And I took that really, really hard. His funeral, so he died on November 30th, and my birthday is December 6th. So his funeral actually fell on my 28th birthday. But I was able to stay clean and sober through that because I left Saginaw and went up north, where I'm originally from, up in the Thumb, and I had the support of my mom, the support of my stepmom, and all this family. And they really helped me to get through it, and then shipped me right back to sober living, because they knew the longer I stayed, the more chances I had of being safe. And then later in the year, well, first I'll say I graduated sober living and I rented a room at this lady's house, and I jumped into another relationship right away. I didn't know how to be alone. Even though that person that passed away and I were not together, I was still dependent on talking to him and him being in my life and us being ingrained, because I had been so codependent on him for so long. I never thought I'd be able to love anybody else. And then he was gone, and I felt like I needed something to fill that void. So I got into another relationship, which was not the best idea. I graduated sober living and started renting a room from this lady, and I'm in Saginaw still. And I started to dabble in things, nothing hard. I would drink or use marijuana, which I knew was wrong, but at the same time, I was grieving and didn't want to deal with it. June 17th, 2018, my mom took her own life and committed suicide, completed suicide. And that's where all of my recovery, all of my common sense, all of my will to live went out the window. I ran the streets of Saginaw rampant for a few good years. I was involved in some horrific things. I was involved in some dangerous, violent things, and I was reckless. I didn't care whether I lived or died, and I would do anything to get that next drug. I was literally homeless, and I was like down to like the basic instincts of a human to survive. Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? I remember times where I didn't have anywhere to take a shower, and I'd go to the truck stop bathroom. I remember sleeping in parks. I remember sleeping in cars. I remember it being winter time and being in the room just so I had house. And at this point, I had hurt every single person that had ever cared about me, and I had absolutely no remorse for anything that I did because all I cared about was getting back. All that ended up catching up to me, and I was eventually incarcerated. I was incarcerated during COVID, during lockdown, and canceled. Saginaw County had just built a new jail. They started the jail up. So there was a while where a lot of people they didn't have anybody on the cable because it was locked down. And the only information we were getting COVID was from the outside world. I had nobody to answer my phone. So nobody, I didn't even know if anybody got locked. I just felt so low, so low. I knew that I had a fork. And at that time, I didn't even really understand what was going to happen. He's having a hard time hearing. Let me whisper.
Give me 1 second, Jaleesa. I'm so sorry to just interrupt you for a second. It's just glitching in and out just a second.
Okay.
It may be something that's going on, and I apologize. Maybe it sounds good right now because maybe you're a little bit closer, so it might be something just with the computer itself. So we'll just continue to monitor it. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, stop me and let me know, please. I was in jail. I had nobody to call. And I knew I hit a fork in the road. And then I remember going to court one day, and I turned around and my dad was there. He had traveled from here to there to come see me in court. And at that time, I had a lot of different charges. I won't get into like what they were or anything, but I was looking at prison time. I was in a lot of trouble. And it was all because of my addiction. It wasn't anything violent. It wasn't anything to hurt anybody. It was all because I had possessed drugs. And I remember seeing my dad there and realizing that even though I felt like he had given up on me, he hadn't. I started speaking with him, and he agreed to support me under very strict terms. He lived out here in St. Clair County. I'd never been in St. Clair County. I lived in Saginaw and Bay City for 10 years through my addiction. And he had a girlfriend who he had been with for about 2 years, and she had 2 kids that were still school age, and she had never dealt with anything like me, you know. And I still remember thinking about how scared she must have been to let me come into and stay in their home, you know, knowing everything that I had done. But they did. And the last time I walked out of Saginaw County Jail, I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I didn't have anything to take with me. So they let me transfer my probation down here, and I started establishing a life in St. Clair County. I enrolled here to get services. I signed up to get my GED, and it didn't really know how I felt at first. It was like the span of like a month I was down here before I started doing anything, and I didn't recognize myself. I had all these feelings, you know, rising to the surface of grief and loss and feeling so bad for the things that I've done and realizing that all that stuff that I did, it doesn't go away. The drugs don't make it go. It's down there somewhere. And I remember my first session here. I had a great therapist. She's no longer here, but I remember just going in there and just bawling. Um, she was amazing. I had to start working on my mental because I knew I was not going to succeed without working on myself. Um, so I started seeing a therapist. I also am a big advocate for MAT services, which we have here at CMH. I got involved with MAT services because it seemed like I just I couldn't quit. Um, but I did. I used medications and
Julie, so would you mind sharing for a second what MAT services are for those that maybe don't know?
sure. So MAT services is medicated assisted treatment, and usually it's for people who are addicted to opiates, like I was. And there's multiple medications that you can use that either help with the cravings. Some of them are just like straight blockers that you can use as like a safety guard. Some of them are an opiate antagonist with a blocker, so it these medicines, what they do is so your opiate receptor, I'm not a scientist, but as far as I know, your opiate receptors are wide open because your brain's not producing serotonin and dopamine and stuff like it's supposed to because you used for so long and overproduced. So what this medication does is it fills that opiate receptor, not enough to get you high, but just enough to where you start to feel normal and function correctly. Um, and it really was a game changer. I I started working on my mental health. I got into MAT services. And I started actually and I was in sober living as well. And I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. Before I realized that I had trust again. I was meeting amazing people in the community. Like I got my GED and they offered me a job there because they had liked me so much and I was so open about sharing my story with all these women that were trying to get their GED and who've gone through life struggles like I had. Um, I I had accountability in sober living. I was when I first started coming to the CMH, I was coming maybe 3 days a week sometimes because I just needed so many services. Between the doctor, the therapist, the case manager, the MAT services. And that was okay because I needed to fill my time with productive things. Because for me, being bored, being idle, would just my brain would go. And it wasn't a good thing. So I did everything I could to keep myself busy with positive things. Um, and then I remember right before I got out of sober living, and I had been there for a year. A year had just flown by and I had accountability. I felt so resilient, I felt like um all these weights were getting lifted off my shoulders. I got involved in the community. I got involved in NA. I started working the steps. I started making these amends to people. I started working on my character defects and really for the first time in my life, understanding who I was. Um, I remember going into therapy one day and her saying, "You don't need me anymore." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Are you firing me?" She's like, "Well, I'm not firing you, but you don't need me anymore. We're basically just checking in at this point. We had worked so hard on so many things." And I realized this is actually a good thing. Um, and I do want to point out too, I had worked with a recovery coach here and I had worked with a recovery coach while I was in sober living. And I started to just really watch what they did and when I would connect with them because they would understand things that I was going through because they didn't read it from a book. And the way that they would help me advocate for myself. And I really started getting interested in it. As I was still getting services here, one of the recovery coaches that I had, she doesn't work here anymore, but she's amazing. I see her in the community all the time. She gave me information that I needed to try to start that process. But at this point, I was seeing a case manager only because I was still getting medication. And we had talked about, you want to work here, you can't get services and work here. And I just needed a doctor to prescribe my med once a month. At this point, I had worked through everything I needed to work through. So I like to call it graduation, but so I found a doctor, and during this time, I got a sober living, and there was a really short period of time where I moved back with my dad, got a job at a factory, which is something I did not want to do. But I knew I had to make money. I got my license for the first time at 30 years old. Um, Graduated, got my GED, got to wear a cap and gown and walk. Got a car, bought myself a car, my first ever car, and got my first apartment. And I did all of that, and I took a step back, and I realized like how amazing my life was and how those feelings were not worth my best day high. I had completely transformed into this person that it almost didn't feel real, the 10 years that I had lived. Um, I don't want to cry. It was really hard without my mom, because we were close, but I knew she was proud. So, and I have a lot of good support from my dad. Um, so I just, I want to let everybody know that it is possible, and I regret the time I wasted. It took me a few tries, obviously, but I don't regret the life that I lived. I did not live today because today I hope. Um, so many people say this. They relate to me so well because I've lived a life, and then um, some of the suggestions that I make and people take, and they just are so surprised that um, there's somebody that has done it. That's the thing. They want somebody who has put this in, and it's so hard for somebody to just get clean and sober and get your life together, right? Break that down in really tiny small goals, and make it achievable. You're there to help advocate for that person, even if they might not be able to advocate for themselves. It is possible. So I'm so thankful for CMH and the staff. I'm so honored to be a part of that staff now. And I really hope that if anybody knows anybody that's struggling, don't give up on them, because if I can do it, anybody. Sorry to cry.
I think everybody might be a little bit tearful at that point, but how can you not be with these stories? Because that's the power of peers. That's the power of the recovery community. That's the power of other folks to say, I've experienced similar things, and it's possible, possible. We hear all the time recovery is possible, but hearing the stories about how they are and just the journeys, and everyone's journey is so unbelievably different. You talked about, a lot of history of incarceration and just other things that were just, you use the word, horrific, and being able to work through that. And I appreciate the fact that you talked about what MAT is, because a lot of people have a lot of stigma
Yeah.
about medications. How are you going to take medications or substances to stop using substances? So did you find you experienced stigma, or there was a stigma component around medications for that?
Yeah. But at the same time, I realized advocate to the people worth advocating for and keep it to myself when I need to keep it to myself. My father was against MAT services because there was a previous time I'd been on methadone, which was not, it didn't work for me. So I understand why he felt that, it wasn't so great. But my dad never knew I was taking the medication I was taking. And that's okay, because obviously it showed that it worked and it didn't affect me. And it made me, to me, it's like, okay, if I can take this medication and do everything right versus the fear of people judging me and potentially messing up, I'm not gonna, I have to worry about myself. So, people that I thought would benefit from it, I did advocate, and the people that didn't, I just left it to myself.
Thank you. Because I think that's important to touch on and share about. And a lot of people maybe don't know that medication assisted actually even exists. So being able to touch upon that and share upon with your story is very appreciated. A lot of feedback and good stuff too. Just thank you for your, what a cool day. First of all, your shirt's amazing, Mental Health
Oh,
Squad. I
thank
love that. I
you.
think I've seen it before. I might have to get one like it because it's really cool. And what a cool being your anniversary date. So 5 years today. So a lot of congratulations from people, and thanks for telling your story and how powerful and amazing and inspiring, and how just a lot of folks that work here also feel very lucky to have you and Crystal and the peers. I always say, I have kind of that book experience, but that life experience is just so unbelievable when it comes to being empowering. So thank you for your story. I'm going to pull back both of you together, if that's all right, Jaleesa and Crystal. So Crystal, you're back again. So if anybody has any questions or feedback for Crystal or Jaleesa, go ahead and put it in the chat if you don't mind. But we did have a question from someone, Marla, and I think it's a fantastic question. What would either speaker say to someone that says, like someone in the family or someone just says, just let the addict hit rock bottom? I feel like I've heard that saying a lot. So when you hear that, just let them hit rock bottom, they've got to hit, the bottom. Any advice for that?
Care if I go first?
Go
Okay.
for it.
I would say that I definitely think for a lot of people in active addiction, rock bottom is important to hit. It really is. And unfortunately, that rock bottom looks entirely different depending on who you're talking to. Some people's rock bottom can be other people's vacations, really. But I would say that I personally think that there's a way to let the individual hit their rock bottom while still being there to support them and show love. Like Jaleesa's dad, who showed up at court for her to show her that he was still there. Maybe, if we're dealing with someone who might be struggling with an addiction and they're constantly asking to borrow money, maybe we don't do stuff like that. We don't maybe buy them some food instead of giving them cash. That would be like the enabling, in my opinion. But like, you can still be there to support someone and show them that you love them, but give them enough space so that they can kind of hit that bottom. I would say that would be what I would say. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jaleesa.
Yeah, so I obviously, my rock bottom was the bottom of the barrel. But like Crystal said, some people don't have to struggle as much as I did to hit rock bottom. And there are ways to love and support a person without enabling them. Like my best friend, she definitely distanced herself from me, but there was times where I'd be on the street starving, and she would say, I'm not going to give you money, but I will buy you food. Or, people that are there to know that if you change, they're going to be there for you, because that's a hard thing too, right? When people have to protect themselves from you and distance themselves from you. But I would definitely say that if I wouldn't have went through everything that I went through, because like I had said in the beginning, my addiction was so easy. I had no consequences, I had no struggles. So I had to feel that pain in order to understand why I had to change. So I would be there to support the person, maybe with their basic needs. Don't give them money, don't enable them, but let them go through their struggles, because that's how they're gonna learn.
That's excellent feedback, because a lot of people just don't know what to do. You hear a lot how, the family and the supports, especially when someone doesn't have a lot of history with addiction or with folks in recovery, just don't know where to turn. Crystal, you had even said like we didn't even know where to go for help or services and so many different things. Jaleesa, you had said, I was out in Saginaw, and for folks in the recovery family, recovery community and supports and things like that, does recovery services look the same everywhere you live? Because you have a good perspective on that too, Jaleesa, because you said Saginaw and then coming here. Does everything, is it cookie cutter, or how different are different communities and different counties?
I'll go first on this one. So in my active addiction, I've lived in Saginaw, I've lived in Flint, I've lived in Detroit, um, and I've been to quite a few different mental health centers. I've been to quite a few different rehabs, and I will say St. Clair County has one of the biggest recovery communities and support that I have ever seen. Some counties basically don't have anything at all. They might not even have NA meetings. You're lucky if they have AA meetings, and then there's other counties like this one who have, recovery community, all the meetings you could think of in recovery based. It's not just NA. They have so many options. The CMH and all the services we provide here. It's definitely, it varies, unfortunately, county to county, because before I moved to Bay City or in Saginaw, I lived up in Huron County, up in the Thumb, and they had nothing. And I think that when I had first, started to really use, if there would have been something that I could have utilized up there, maybe things would have been different.
And it seems like, over the past few years, in some of the smaller communities and more remote communities, it's tougher to be able to access those services. But there are things popping up in different areas, and recovery is ever evolving everywhere. And just knowing that, we're very fortunate in St. Clair County. There's a lot of other good counties that have good supports, and that if someone lives in a county, maybe not St. Clair County, but they call our St. Clair County Community Mental Health Access Services, or they call one of the recovery organizations in the community, knowing that they will support you and point you and give you direction to where you live or what county or what community, and not just say, well, you're not in St. Clair County, we can't help you. So that's another thing that's beautiful about the recovery community. The recovery communities come up a lot and talked about a lot. And it's not always this structured go to a 12-step meeting type of things. The recovery community is so much more, because what's coming up this weekend is Recovery Fest,
Recovery
right? This
Fest.
weekend. Woo! So I'm excited. I'm going to be at Recovery Fest, hanging out all day at the CMH table. Would you mind sharing with anybody in the community? Maybe they don't know what Recovery Fest is. Maybe they're like, oh, I heard about it, but I'm not going, or thinking about going. Or can we bring our family? Do you have to be someone in recovery? Would you guys mind talking a little bit about Recovery Fest this weekend?
Yeah. Well, Recovery Fest is one big celebration. Honestly, it is totally 100% family friendly. They have like a bunch of different vendors there. I know that they have like a recovery run that they do. Um, I'm not sure if they're doing their
Yes.
softball tournament, which is always fun. And isn't it like the police department? Is it like usually the police department and
It was last year. I don't know who they're going against this year, but I know
Mhm.
they're having it.
fire department and stuff? But it's just like one big day of fun and love. And that is one thing I will say is like during the beginning of my recovery, I knew nothing about the recovery community. Now, I will say, unlike Jaleesa, I only have experience really in St. Clair County. Um, but I didn't know anything about the recovery community. And it wasn't really until I got kind of introduced to Blue Water Recovery and Outreach that I really learned just how much is out there and just how loving and welcoming and how large the recovery community is. I mean, I feel like my recovery would have been a different experience if I would have known more about what was available to us. And that's why I think it's so important that we talk about these services and we get the word out there, because there may be people out there, just like me, who was looking for their people and, didn't know where to look. So, but yeah, it's going to be this weekend, and oh my goodness, it's going to be a great time. So anyone who is available, come out, bring your kids, bring your partners, bring your whole family. Like it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, and I do want to say, they do. Last year, I know they did. I think 99% sure this year they provide free meals. And they're gonna have a guy, he is a rapper from Michigan. His name is Kaluchi, who went viral a few years ago for his rap that he did, like talking about his life in recovery. I've watched some of his videos. He's amazing. Um, so I would definitely check him out. And I do want to mention too, you don't stop having fun when you come into recovery. So many people think that your life is over, that you're not going to have any fun anymore, you know. But there are so many things that we do in the recovery community that I have so much fun. VW Rock is a huge staple in the recovery community, and they're always doing something. They're doing dinners, they're doing barbecues, they're having little get-togethers, you know. Once you get involved in the recovery community, if you want to, you can keep yourself busy all the time. And that's so important to meet those people and utilize, you know, those support. So I highly encourage anybody that, you know, maybe looking, you know, to get involved in the recovery community to come to Recovery Fest, because it'll open the doors to a lot of different people and places that you can utilize within the county.
That's an awesome thing. And I know there's a rock climbing wall and all kinds of cool stuff going on. When you talked about the recovery community a lot, you know, a lot of people in recovery or further along in the recovery may know, but maybe folks that are sort of newer to the recovery, and again, going back to those family, friends, supports that may not know a lot about recovery, to be involved in the recovery community, do you have to be far along and active in your recovery?
No,
Okay.
absolutely
Can you
not.
talk a little bit about that?
So there are a lot of places that would prefer you not have used drugs that day. I would say most people don't want you to come high. Maybe there's some that would rather have you there high than there not at all. It really depends. Um, but recovery people are the most genuine, um, kind people that you will ever meet. So they're gonna welcome you with open arms regardless. And I would say that you know, no matter how many times somebody may relapse or how many times somebody may make mistakes, we're always gonna welcome you back because we understand that struggle. Um, I don't think, can you think of anywhere where they would like, well, I mean, so like I guess there might be places that if you're like a trigger to people, they would turn you away. But if you just come in looking for support, I don't think they would. Um, like I said, they're just the most amazing people in the world. I don't think really they turn anybody away ever.
Yeah. So a
Yeah.
lot of like the fun events and things like that. If a
Oh,
family member's like, I want to be able to support my loved one in recovery, but we can't go to the event because they're not in active recovery or we can't participate with these fun things. That's one of the times to bring them in because, you know, like you had talked about, Crystal, the isolation and the vulnerability of folks, but being able to start building that community at any point in your recovery.
mm-hmm.
Very cool. All right. A lot of congratulations. Awesome. Jaleesa, somebody shared how much they love your name. So I think it's just really cool comments and different things like that. And I don't know. I can share just for myself. I know there's a lot of like heaviness of the day being like 9/11 and a lot of heavy events happening, you know, recently and things like that. And I was just telling some coworkers this morning, I leaned over to their chairs and I said, all right, something needs to kind of turn this day around a little bit because it just felt really heavy. And I want to let both of you know, at least for myself, but I'm thinking I'm also speaking for a lot of the other people on here that this has been that brightness that my day sort of needed of, you know, hope and positivity and hearing wonderful stories. And you guys just did such an amazing job that I feel reinvigorated for the day. And I feel that I have that positivity that I was searching for today that I so desperately needed. So your mental health squad squatted up, Jaleesa, and worked
Yeah,
because it
big
helped. And
cry
hopefully it
baby, I
did.
guess.
Yeah, that's our no, it was fantastic. Vulnerability is a huge part of it, right? It's a huge, huge part of it. It shows that we're real. And I think it's so appreciated by other people. I'm sure it's appreciated by people in the recovery journey, their family and friends. And I can talk from a person who's a professional, you know, working in the community that it helps me as a professional understand from so many different angles and ways and just kind of reground me as well too. So thank you both extremely, very, very much. I want to be able to thank everybody that tuned in today as well too. If anybody is interested in any other information about recovery services or recovery supports, organizations in the community, we want to really encourage you to go to our St. Clair County Community Mental Health website, which is sccmh.org. That has a lot of information, not only about community mental health, but a lot of the recovery resources and different things. If you're not a person who likes to jump on the computer and go, this kind of confuses me, or I don't even have access to it, you can certainly call our access line, our phone number, our anything, just to be able to, connect to someone and ask the questions about what the next step can be or what the possibility is for different things. So again, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Crystal. We are going to go ahead and do the wrap up. So I'm going to go ahead and just share a little bit more. Today's presentation, again, is just one of many of the webinars being offered throughout the month of September that you can still join up to be able to attend. I believe this was the second of our Voices of Recovery Journey peer stories, and those are usually the ones that have, all of them are very powerful and inspiring, and we certainly appreciate these. For details, if you're interested in registering for more sessions or seeing what we have available, please visit our website at www.sccmh.org, and you go under the events tab, and it has a lot of information. If you've never even visited our website before, please jump on, because there's all kinds of awesome things. We also have a Facebook page through St. Clair County Community Mental Health that we share information about services, highlight different community events like Recovery Fest and things going on, food pantries in the community, talking about our services, advocacy, so many awesome things. So we invite you to join our Facebook page as well too. So as conclusion, as part of attending this webinar today, please keep an eye out for a short survey on your email. We really appreciate the feedback, and we appreciate that our presenters gave their time to share their recovery stories. And if you have any kind of feedback, comments, other things that you would want to share with them, include it on there. We'll make sure we get the information back to our presenters, and we, again, would welcome that for sure. So your input is vital. It also helps us continue to improve future events, different trainings that we do in the community, Recovery Summit series for next year. If you're really loving these recovery stories, we'll make sure we keep those on the summit or maybe even add to it. So for those requesting any kind of MCBAP credits, peer certificates, just to let you know, they'll be mailed out to you by mid-October. We do that when all of the summit has concluded. And for those of you that are requesting social work CEs, your certificates will be emailed to you after payment for the CEs is received. So thank you again to our presenters. Thank you again for everyone for being with us today. And for those of you joining us in future sessions, we look forward to seeing you. Thank you.